It's an absolute disgrace what's happening in relation to tolls. That the government would increase the cost of tolls to commuters at a time where people are suffering from the cost of living crisis is bananas. Like, people are finding it hard to pay for fuel. They're finding it hard to buy cars. They're finding it impossible to get their car's service even fixed because of the costs of that. And at the same time now, the government are actually going to hike up the cost of tolls to people. And it's incredible because the government actually own two tolls. They own the M50 toll and the Eastlink toll. And those tolls have been paid for multiple times by the commuter at the moment. Aintu put in a parliamentary question in recent times which showed that the commuter has paid 1.3 billion euros on tolls for the M50 toll. And that's a toll that was built for about 130 million euros years ago, back in the day. Like, we've paid for 10 times over at this stage. It should not be going up at this moment in time. And like, the idea that this is happening as well, when, if anybody's commuting in this country will tell you that the traffic congestion is crazy. I know people from the commuter belt, from the commuter hell belt, as I would call it, that are spending 3 hours now in traffic commuting from their home into work and back every day. And that's an incredible situation. So this is a tax on work, it's a tax on commuting, and now people are having an increase in that for the pleasure of sitting in traffic chaos on a daily basis. And there's no alternative for people. So, the likes of people from Meath, for example, there's still no rail line from Meath to Dublin. The bus services right across the commuter belt are in a jock at the moment. You have a situation where many buses now are not arriving. The buses that do arrive, they're full, so they can't pick people up at bus stops. We have traffic chaos right across the cities and towns of this country. We have a cost of living crisis affecting the pockets of 90% of the population, and the government's response to it is to put tolls up. We in Aintu are calling for the government, first of all, to put a ceiling on tolls on the public partner projects that are out there, but on the tolls that they own, on the M50 and Eastlink, to scrap the tolls altogether.
I don't know what the government would say in their defence, but hypothetically, what if a government minister was to say something like, well, raw materials are becoming more expensive, and of course roads need maintenance, they need to be re-tarmacked and so on every now and again, so for that reason we need to increase the tolls so that we can keep the roads in good nick. I don't know if that's what they would say, but if they did say that, what would your response be?
First of all, I put it to the Tánaiste today on the floor of the Dáil, and interestingly, the Tánaiste was the Minister for Transport right up until 2014, and the current TII, the Transport Infrastructure for Ireland organisation, that government state organisation, was built by his department when he was the minister. Now, the Tánaiste, like many people says, well, it's not our fault, the decision was made by the TII, but that's like the Minister for Health saying it's not our fault, the decision is made by the HSE. These organisations are responsible to these state to the minister, and as a result, they should do what the minister tells them to do. So yes, there's no doubt that it costs money to keep the infrastructure as it should be. But nobody is saying that it's costing billions of euros to put Tarmacadam onto the M50, over the space of 10 years. These are cash cows. This is not a case whereby they're looking to actually cover the costs of the inputs. These are cash cows for the government. These are a form of taxation, but they're not a form of taxation that is decided upon how much you earn. Progressive tax, the idea that was designed back in the 1700s, that the more you earn, the more you should pay. This is not the case. This is saying to hard-working people who are getting up at 6:30 in the morning to commute for an hour and a half into work. These are saying that you pay on the basis of you working. For many people, they can't afford it anymore. For many people, they can't afford to pay for the fuel that goes into the car. Incredibly, the government are taking more in VAT and costs and taxes on fuel now than they did before the cost of living crisis came about. So when the government say they can't do anything about it, the government are not telling the truth.
One of the big arguments that we hear for the benefits that Ireland has accrued from the European Union since we joined the EEC back in the 1970s is the fact that we had all of this investment for new roads, and many of these roads are the roads we're talking about now with the tolls. Do you think when the government brings this up, or many of the more kind of pro-European factions within Ireland, they realise that people do pay for the roads? The road that wasn't free money necessarily. It was a temporary loan almost that we have now paid back kind of in spades.
Yeah, there's no doubt at the time there was a sovereignty for cash swap that happened in the state, and if people remembered the referendum questions that were asked of us around the further integration of power into the European Union, it was about this investment and that investment, and there were billions of euros that were invested into Ireland at the time, but actually that would make up a small amount of the money that's actually gone into our infrastructure. Most of our infrastructure has been paid for through the taxation of the Irish people. And also remember that Ireland is a net contributor currently in terms of the budgets for the European Union. So any net gain that we may have achieved in the late 80s and early 90s in these terms has been paid back significantly over the last couple of years in our contribution to European budgets. And that's not even taking into consideration the fact that the European Union basically have taken over a significant element of our fishing industry. Indeed, European fleets, French and Belgian and other Spanish fishing fleets would actually take far more of our fish out of Irish waters now at the moment than the Irish fishing fleet does. And indeed, we're seeing another round of the decommissioning of fishing vessels happening, where literally the few remaining fishermen that are out there are being told, we'll give you money so we can cut up your boat. And so, I have no doubt if you put a weighing scales in place and looked at the amount of money that's been received from the European Union, that has been well paid back at this stage.